You're listening to Cosmic Cousins Soul-Centered Astrology. I am your host, Jeff Henshaw. Thanks for tuning in. Cosmic Cousins is dedicated to honoring the interconnectedness of our universal family through embodied health, self-discovery, and deeper learning. And it is here to bring you back into alignment with the cosmos. So thank you for being here as always. Hey Cosmic Cousins, welcome back to another week of the podcast. Happy Gemini Full Moon to you. This is the final full moon of 2022, and it finds itself in the whimsical and communicative Mutable Air sign of Gemini. So we have an exciting episode today. We'll connect to this Gemini full moon through a little meditation, a little tarot connection. We'll talk about some of the current transits. And then we have a conversation with my friend Pavanjeet, who is a Gemini moon themselves. And in our conversation, we explore a lot of different Gemini topics. We talk about our past selves. We talk about life as a celebration. We talk about breathwork, mudras, Gemini soul twinning, how to navigate the holidays as a queer person, and a lot more. Pavanjeet is a breathwork facilitator and a meditation teacher and sound healer that lives in Boulder, Colorado. And so you'll get to meet Pavanjeet in a bit. Pavanjeet also offers us an 11-minute gong bath meditation too. That closes out our conversation, so you'll want to stick around for that. I listened to it in a restorative yoga pose, and I thought that was something really nice and nourishing to do for this full moon. So I hope you'll stick around for that. But yeah, before we get into that conversation, I always check in with you about the full or the new moon. And so if you're new here, welcome. I release this podcast ritual, I call it a ritual, on each new and full moon. And it offers us an opportunity to just check in with each other and see how we are experiencing the unfolding astrological transits. So yeah, Gemini full moon, blessings to you. The phrases I have for us, I'll always offer 3 phrases. And these phrases are sometimes more traditional, sometimes more intuitive, that will help us connect into the lunation. So for this Gemini full moon, we have I listen, I communicate, I integrate. I listen, I communicate, I integrate. So Gemini is the polar sign to Sagittarius. This is why we're having the Gemini full moon. It's Sagittarius season. So the full moon is always going to be in the polar sign. And Gemini is here to offer balance to the visionary pursuits of Sagittarius. Gemini is much more interested in the immediate surroundings. Sagittarius is the philosophical archer that's aiming their bow and arrow towards the cosmos. Gemini is the playful twins, and Gemini connects us to our siblings, our soul twins. So lovingly bring your awareness towards your immediate surroundings. Gemini is encouraging us to ask questions about duality in the world, to communicate about contradiction with curiosity, with playfulness, with ease. And so Gemini is the messenger. So we may receive messages here on this full moon. Gemini is connected to phone calls, handwritten letters, things you receive in the mail. Gemini is connected to birds, to angels, to small animals, to children. And also, I think of synchronicities with Gemini. And so I wanted to share this concept with you. It's called cosmic cookie crumbs. What are cosmic cookie crumbs? I have referred to them in passing on the podcast before, but I've never formally talked about it or written about them. And so I wrote about them in the newsletter for this Gemini full moon. And I sent out a newsletter for each new and full moon that essentially is an outline to the podcast episode with images and prompts and tarot spreads, things like that. So if you're interested in having that visual support to the podcast, you could sign up for the newsletter. There's a link in the show notes. But yeah, what are cosmic cookie crumbs? This is what I refer to in my own practice as a trail of synchronicities aligned with the cosmos that offer confirmation along your way. Some people experience it with repeating numbers. Other people experience it with finding feathers or pennies. We each have our own relationship, and for me, it's always changing. But often these synchronicities show up in the form of symbols, images, items. It could even be interactions with other people, with other animals in our everyday life that speak to and encapsulate the energy of our current astrological transits and offer some confirmation for us along our way. And so on this Gemini full moon, I feel called to highlight and shout out to cosmic cookie crumbs in hopes to bring more of a collective awareness around their influence. Sometimes when we have a name for it, it helps us. So anyway, I bring this up because of a recent interaction that took place under the light of this Gemini moon. And so I've decided to test out making Cosmic Cookie Crumbs a new segment in the newsletter and podcast. And it's my hopes that it inspires more magic and as a way to offer a symbol to help us understand the astrological energy. So our Cosmic Cookie Crumb symbol for contemplation on this Gemini full moon is this. A pink balloon animal in the shape of a dog, handed to me by a stranger/neighbor on my evening walk around the block. A pink balloon animal in the shape of a dog handed to me by a stranger or neighbor on my evening walk around the block. So last night, it was a midnight stroll. It was a late night. I was in my neighborhood taking my dog out on a walk, and I was meditating on the Gemini full moon. And this stranger walks towards me and offers to hand me this pink balloon animal. And at first I was taken aback. It's late at night. There are hardly any street lights on. Where I live, people don't really say hey to you even in broad daylight. So the fact that this person's handing me this pink balloon animal, I hesitated, and I noticed my own mistrust in the situation. But I assessed it, and I realized that this person was completely genuine and innocent and wanted to give me this balloon. So this sparked a little conversation between us around his new love of making balloon animals, and now he enjoys sharing the joy with passerbys. And so this balloon animal now sits on my Gemini full moon altar. And what this cosmic cookie crumb communicates to us about this full moon is a few things. Gemini is connected to our neighbors. It's connected to siblings and also to strangers. Gemini is also connected to inner child healing and small animals. He's a small dog. And the balloon, inner child healing. Gemini is also ruled by Mercury, which is attributed to the magician in the tarot. All of these themes collide into one in this balloon animal interaction. And it reminds me of one of Gemini's soul purposes, which is to navigate darkness in an airy and uplifting way. Gemini is about duality. There's a lot of duality taking place in this interaction. My own mistrust and a seemingly innocent interaction is something that I'm sitting with on this full moon and something I'm reflecting on with Gemini, and perhaps you will too. So what does this symbol conjure up for you? What is the balloon animal in your life at this time? Who are the strangers? Who are the messengers? How might you be denying yourself greater love and joy and magic out of protection? And how might you open yourself up to greater inner child healing and play? What is your relationship to your neighbors, to complete strangers? These are all questions for reflection. And Gemini actually encourages us to ask these life questions. It makes me think of Queen of Gemini, Stevie Nicks. Oh, mirror in the sky, what is love? Can the child within my heart rise above? These big contemplative questions Gemini can ask. And so on this Gemini full moon, Jupiter is at the final degrees of Pisces, which also makes me think of a balloon, an inflation of universal love and magic. Jupiter is the ruling planet for Sagittarius. These mutable signs, Gemini and Pisces, both hold this magic and play in common. Pisces brings a bit more of a universal approach than Gemini, more of a willingness to surrender into the unknown, where Gemini might actually want to know the details and the facts. So Jupiter and Pisces at the final degree. This is the final degree of the whole zodiac wheel. This is the Mr. Rogers degree. Mr. Rogers was Sun in Pisces at the 29 degrees. How might you lean more into forgiveness and release as we close out this year? Jupiter at the final degree of Pisces. How might you gift yourself the extra space to make peace with the past so you can continue forward with greater ease and grace? So Gemini full moon, ruled by Mercury, just entered Capricorn at the early degrees of Capricorn. Mercury is going to be in Capricorn for 2 months because Mercury will station retrograde in Capricorn in January. So we're also starting to think a bit more practically, a bit more about our long-term approach. So there is a shift in energy at this full moon. And our phrases again, let's revisit the phrases. I listen, I communicate, I integrate. And so you could pull a tarot card for each of these. You could fill in the blank. You could have it spark conversation or journal prompts. The questions I have for us, card 1, how might I more deeply listen to my intuition? Card 2, in what ways might I more clearly communicate? And card 3, how might I more fully integrate the duality that lives within? Gemini wants to know. One way we can do this is by connecting to the body. Gemini is connected to things that come in pairs, our eyes and our ears, our hands and our arms, our shoulders, our lungs. These are Gemini's sacred body parts. And so I invite you to bring duality together. How do you feel split? Do you feel torn in 2 different directions? Do you have a mischievous self? And then do you have maybe like your higher self, your angelic self? And how do you build a bridge between these 2 polarities within yourself? And one way we can do that simply is by just creating an intention of bringing the hands together in a prayer position, the left hand with the right hand, the yin and yang sides together. And so perhaps this is just something you do simply here on this Gemini full moon, is to honor the duality that lives within and to honor the duality that lives outside of you. And instead of trying to resist it, how might you build a bridge between these aspects? And so placing the hands together in a prayer position if you're able, taking a deep breath into your hands, your arms, your shoulders, and your lungs. These are some of Gemini's body parts. And so as you breathe in, invite greater circulation and ease and flow into your life. And as you breathe out, let go of any excess energy by shaking the hands or circling the shoulders. And, this is a quite activated full moon because this Gemini full moon is aligned in the sky with Mars, currently retrograde. And so this marks the halfway point of this longer Mars and Gemini transit. This full moon offers a spotlight to reflect on the entirety of this 7-month-long transit. So the Mars and Gemini dates, Mars entered Gemini on August 20th of this year, 2022. Mars stationed retrograde on October 30th. Again, this full moon and Gemini conjunct Mars is the halfway point, December 7th. Is a Gemini full moon. Wednesday, Mercury's Day, December 7th at 8:08 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at the 16th degree of Gemini. And then on January 12th in 2023, Mars will station direct And then Mars will be in Gemini January, February through most of March, and then we'll enter Cancer on March 25th. So again, this full moon halfway point offers a spotlight to reflect on the entirety of this 7-month-long transit. What has Mars and Gemini been stirring up for you? You may receive new insights or clues into what this Mars and Gemini time period has activated for you and how to better navigate this energy. So open yourself up to receive new information on ways to channel your social, intellectual, and mental capabilities, Gemini, to bring greater healing to yourself and others. How are you directing your force, your action, your willpower towards Gemini in your life? We are rediscovering what this means to us. I'll share in my own personal life. I have personal reflection on the Mars retrograde transit, and perhaps this will elicit something within you and help you connect to it in your own life. So in my own personal life, this Gemini full moon conjunct Mars is taking place in my 5th house of creative expression. So I'm reflecting on the ways in which I use my thoughts, my ideas, and my words, Gemini, to create in a playful way in the world, 5th house. What is exciting for me about this extended period of time with Mars and Gemini is that I've been directing more of my focus and my ambition towards creating an astro oracle deck. And I should be receiving the first printed copy of this oracle deck this week in the mail, which also feels very Gemini. So the thing that I want to bring up about is the retrograde energy. I'm still very much in a retrograde phase about the whole process, though. For one, creating a deck takes a lot more work than I have ever realized. And so as I learn about design, layout, behind the scenes, communication, and the other detail-oriented aspects that come along with the job, I have a whole new relationship and appreciation for my tarot cards, which is really cool. But another reason I'm in a retrograde phase with the project is because I'm still grappling with and understanding what our collective relationship is to the new medium of art that is emerging, which is artificial intelligence. And so this Astro Oracle deck that I've been working on has been designed by using Midjourney AI to create and conceptualize images that speak to my own unique perspective on astrology. And this is equally as exciting as it is a bit edgy and unknown, maybe even a little controversial. And so with Mars and Gemini retrograde, I'm still reflecting on my relationship to what is shifting and changing. And so I'm interested in continuing to hear others' perspectives. This is Gemini, and to create dialogue on this new medium of AI as we continue to adapt to this emerging technology. And so our dear friend, Edgar Fabian Frias, who is a Gemini sun, just posted about this topic on their social media. And this is what they wrote. Quote, "Please remember that technophobia, fear, and discomfort emerge every time we see innovations and changes in art and artistic mediums. With that said, it's also imperative that we critique and analyze what these changes mean for our practices and our culture in general." They then go on to write, and I'd like to read the whole post, actually. I think it's just very timely. This is what Edgar wrote. "Have been seeing a lot of thoughts, hot takes, and fears being shared about AI. I want to hold space for that while also naming that as someone who studied art history, this is something that happens whenever new technology or mediums emerge in art, and I'm wondering if this time it's different. This definitely feels like an important invitation for us to analyze and critique these new mediums and to think about their long-term impact. Personally, I have been enjoying working with AI, and it's been interesting to see what information and aesthetics the algorithm favors and or is limited by. There are definitely tons of issues with lack of representation, biases, prejudice, and with the way these data sets and algorithms pretend to be neutral while upholding problematic power structures and their non-neutrality. There are concerns about what these technologies mean for artists, for copyright infringement, for data security, and more. What are your thoughts on AI? Would love to hear." So again, this quote is from Edgar Fabian's Twitter, and as I encourage you to check it out if you're interested in this topic. It's something that I'm interested in as I continue to find new ways to create and express my truth in the world. And so, Mars in retrograde, Mars in Gemini retrograde. I'm excited about this Astro Oracle deck. It's 78 cards in the deck. They've all been created. They are complete with a card for each zodiac queen, and then there's a card for each of the 12 houses, each of the 12 zodiac signs. I'll tell you more about it later, but I still need time. And this deck won't be released in the world until after I have educated myself more on this new medium. I'm still learning about this art form and educating myself on ways to communicate about the radical potential that this technology holds for greater healing and consciousness and for the astrology community. So I give this as an example because I'll be spending the remainder of the Mars retrograde time period researching and going within. This is retrograde, with my ambition and with my focus, which is Mars, towards creating something with my mind, with my hands, so that I can share my ideas, Gemini, with you all. And so I plan to release more information about this Astro Oracle's potential release on the Aquarius new moon. This will be after Mars is stationed direct, and Mercury has stationed direct. And so this will be January 21st. 2023 is the Aquarius new moon, so I'll release more information in the coming months. So that's how I'm experiencing Mars retrograde. How are you experiencing it? I'd be curious to know. So if you have a Mars retrograde story, maybe you post about it on social media and tag me in it. I'd love to read about it. So yes, Gemini full moon conjunct Mars are phrases I listen, I communicate, I integrate. I have some Gemini full moon affirmations for us. And as I share these, perhaps you breathe them into the Gemini body parts, the shoulders, the arms, the hands, the lungs, as we transition into the next part of this podcast episode. Our Gemini full moon affirmations. I build a bridge between my personality self and my spiritual self. Breathe that into the body. I hold space for the complexities of duality both within and without. My mind is adaptable. My mind is lovable. My mind is free. You may even find that you'd like to connect to the Lover's Tarot card on this Gemini full moon. This is Gemini's soul growth card. And we're actually closing out our collective tarot Lover's Year. 2022 has been a Lover's Year, so maybe you're even reflecting on what this Lover's Year has meant to you. And at this time, I think we're ready to transition into this next part of our episode. So let's do that now. So before we head into our conversation with Pavanjeet, I do have some announcements. In case the Cosmic Cousins Gemini Full Moon podcast episode isn't enough for you, I'm excited to announce that I have not one, but two, in that very Gemini way, podcast collaboration conversations to share with you. The first one is with the incredible Jonathan Coe, who is a Gemini Moon, host of the podcast Healing the Spirit, and we have a conversation titled Cultivating the Flame of Devotion. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And also, the second podcast collaboration was with the insightful Nick of the In Search of Tarot podcast. And in our conversation titled Queering Astrology, we discuss the path that led me to astrology and tarot, and we talk about queerness and astrology. And so perhaps you'll take a listen to that too. I also wanted to share some community announcements. Congratulations to Maha Rose Healing Center. They just announced on this Gemini full moon that they will be reopening in Brooklyn, New York in the spring of 2023. And Maha Rose is the healing center where I first offered tarot and astrology readings back in 2016. And I am forever grateful for the Maha Rose community and the connections and opportunities that this loving community provided for me and so many more. Also, a special congratulations to Charlie Claire Burgess of the Fifth Spirit Tarot. They are releasing a new edition of their tarot deck through Hay House. And for those of you who follow my work closely, you know I love this tarot deck. I'm always using it in my teachings, as I love how it expands the traditional tarot archetypes beyond the gender binary, reimagining the cards from a queer and inclusive perspective. And so, yes, that new deck is open for pre-order. So you could check that out. I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. And then finally, Lane Smith recently released a list of paired books with tarot decks as gift ideas. And I thought this was really inspiring approach, and it felt very Sagittarius to me. It's building bridges between books and tarot. And then Lane communicated to me that they are a Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Neptune in Sagittarius, which is a lot of Sagittarian energy. So it made sense to me. But yeah, they paired tarot decks with books. So the Next World Tarot has been paired with the book The Untold History of American Labor, Fight Like Hell. And the Tarot of the Cosmic Seed has been paired with Journal of Radical Permission. So there's a list of 10 of them. If you are interested in new book ideas, new tarot deck ideas, I'll also put a link to that in the show notes too. And, there's something about this Gemini energy that wants us to connect to others in our community. And so I wanted to share some of those community announcements with you. And of course, as always, I'm forever grateful for you and our community. Thank you to those who tune into the podcast and read the newsletters. Thank you to all of those who are Patreon supporters. You make this show possible. If you'd like to support the production of this podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. This helps me as an independent practitioner support my life and work. So you can go to patreon.com/Cosmic Cousins for that. And as always, I'm offering both astrology and tarot readings. I'm also currently taking applications for 2023 one-on-one mentorships. If you've already applied for a 2023 mentorship and you've not heard back from me, I will be getting back to you by the end of the week. And so I'm wishing you a happy Gemini Full Moon. If you'd like to rate and review, you can always do that too. And I always like to share one of the reviews. And we just got a few new reviews in. So I'll share that. And then we'll head into our convo with Pavanjeet. So this is what someone recently wrote on the reviews. This is from Lula Sphinx. Warm, fuzzy feelings. Grateful for this podcast. I love Jeff's gentle energy and his perspectives on astrology, which I find really unique and inspiring. Always so soothed by these episodes, and it's a nice tool to gather my energy to align with the moon phases. Thank you, with a purple heart emoji. Thank you, Lula Sphinx, and thank you to all of those who tune in. It's an honor to be here with you. At this time, let's transition into our conversation with Pavanjeet, who is a Kundalini yoga and meditation teacher, sound healer, breathwork practitioner, and Western astrologer based in Boulder, Colorado. Pavanjeet his teaching style balances the profound and the potent with lighthearted play. Pavanjeet means breath of victory. In our conversation titled The Brilliance of Surviving, we discuss our past selves, life as a celebration, healing as the new nightlife, breathwork, supportive mudras, Gemini soul twinning, how to navigate the holidays as a queer person, Sagittarius and the great outdoors, and Fox medicine. During our conversation, Pavanjeet poses a question in that Gemini way that I think could be quite powerful to meditate on or even pull a tarot card for on this full moon. The question is, how do we glorify what is already so brilliant in our worlds? And again, we close out our time together with Pavanjeet offering us an 11-minute gong bath meditation. So at this time, let's transition into that conversation now. So here with us today on Cosmic Cousins, we're welcoming back my dear friend Pavanjeet for the second time, except this time we get to shape-shift our conversation to connecting to your Gemini moon. Last time we had you on for Scorpio season back in 2018 when we crowned Georgia O'Keeffe the Queen of Scorpio. And I was looking at your Instagram bio, just like the little one-liner, and it says Scorpio intensity and Gemini wackiness. Welcome back to Cosmic Cousins.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to talk about Gemini. It's much more fun and wacky than Scorpio.
Totally. And you have this Sag rising too. So you have this polarity, activated for you in your big three. So in some ways, yes, we get the Scorpio sun, but this Gemini Sagittarius axis is alive for you. What would your word for Sagittarius be? We got Scorpio intensity, Gemini wackiness, and Sagittarius.
Wisdom?
I like that. I was feeling that even in the pause that you were taking to think about it. Seemed more philosophical. Wisdom. You are a teacher. You work with sound healing. You work with breathwork, Kundalini, astrology, all the things. So we feel the Sagittarian interdisciplinarian approach, I think, for sure. And I'm also thinking of Gemini having many different modalities as well as a mutable sign. So I would love to get into all of this with you today. You've just been traveling. This is like Gemini, but it's also Sag. How do you differentiate between these two signs?
I think it's always hard in yourself to differentiate, because I was trying to understand, Scorpio and Gemini are very different as well. Sagittarius and Gemini are very different. But I remember reading somewhere how Scorpio, and you don't get any different in the zodiac than Scorpio and Gemini. But obviously I hold all of these aspects in myself. So for me, understanding what aspect of me comes from where is an interesting dissection. Between the Sag and the Gemini, I'm sorry, ask me.
This polarity. We were talking about travel. So
travel.
Maybe I got a little bit ahead of myself in that Gemini Sag way. It sometimes happens. It can sometimes feel a little scattered. So I always do think of people I know with strong Gemini and Sagittarius energy have found some sort of like meditation practice in their life to bring in like the single focus. So let's rewind a little bit. And I'd love to hear, how you were introduced to astrology. I mean, you bring these practices, you weave them together with astrology. So what came first? Was it yoga, breath work, astrology, sound healing?
The astrology came first for me. The astrology definitely came first. I was always, since I was young, I was really interested in astrology. I was like a theater kid and was just interested in, with that Gemini moon, very interested in people and personalities and archetypes and understanding the mind and understanding what makes people tick. But again, I kind of feel like that plays into my Scorpio sun as well, right? Like getting into the psychology of someone and understanding their motives. But it was definitely the astrology that came first for me, and understanding that and understanding people. And then I moved to New York City, and that's really when I kind of had a mentor in a Gemini, actually. Sophia Lamar, who's a nightlife personality, was kind of like my nightlife mother, and also taught me a bunch about astrology. She would just like point out people and go, "Oh, that shitty Cancer." Just talk about everyone and give me the lowdown on the astrological atmosphere of the nightlife. So the astrology definitely came first, and then basically out of necessity from a lifetime in nightlife, I had to learn how to quickly recover, which was I would like wreck myself one night, and then I'd have to like figure out, okay, how do I function the next day after I've totally wrecked myself? And it's a funny thing, but that's really where like health and wellness came from, and where doing yoga and all of that came out of was, oh, I need to recover so that I can do it all again the next night. And how do I how do I take care of it? So it wasn't a very like spiritual means of getting there, but eventually got me there. And then I really deepened my practice with astrology and meditation when my father passed very suddenly in a plane crash, and that made me just kind of analyze where I was in my life and what I was doing and who I was. And yoga was what helped me to kind of understand myself and kind of pull back the layers and see what I really wanted to do in the world and who I wanted to be.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for your vulnerability of sharing this tougher life experience that you've moved through with the passing of your father. And I'm hearing that and just holding space for it and witnessing that these more intense life experiences can often be catalyst for some sort of awakening, some sort of new direction for us in order to process that experience. And so I'm also hearing, so thank you for sharing that. And also I'm hearing, it's interesting for me because I met you not at this phase in your life where you were, queen of nightlife, going out in New York City. And what is interesting about the intersection of our journeys is I also had that time period in my life too in New York, but we didn't meet during that time. And maybe we were like parallel.
Or we did.
We did. We just don't remember. And I'm also sensing Gemini with this, and I'll explain why. But I want to first start by sharing the esoteric phrase for Gemini, and we'll see what it brings up for you, particularly in light of reflecting on this past self of yours, nightlife in New York, and how you have transitioned into this person that I know today that in some ways I can feel that nightlife in you. Like you bring nightlife party. It makes me think of a Sagittarius friend I have named Amanda Capobianco, who her catchphrase is "Healing is the new nightlife." You kind of bring that vibe, but you're also, I know you as this very centered, holistic person that is very dedicated and devoted to their spiritual practices. So it's fun for me to like think about this nightlife side of you and still feel it. So the phrase for Gemini is, I see my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. I see my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. So we can sit with that for a moment. All of us at this Gemini full moon, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on this phrase, and particularly those with strong Gemini placements. And Gemini in the big three will likely find a particular resonance with this phrase. And I'm already feeling it come out in our conversation. So I'd be curious what that phrase might bring up for you, particularly in light of some of what we're talking about.
Well, I'm really attaching to the last part, which is glow. And I've really been in this process of understanding what my purpose is and re-understanding my purpose, especially as a teacher and a healer and somebody who facilitates spaces for people. And, part of my identity is a helper, right? A support, somebody who helps other people. And so that's one of my identities. But now I've been leaning more into the identity that we kind of talked about, which is this celebrator of life, which is what I think I was naturally drawn to with that nightlife, but is something that now I can do in a different way, which is really celebrating people through their astrology, through the challenges that they've overcome in their life, through the brilliance of surviving what they've experienced in their life, and coming up stronger and with more gifts. So there's something I'm really connecting with, shining light on the celebratory aspect of myself, that part of my personality, kind of still holding on to the helper and supporter, but leaning more into life as a celebration, and how do we just glorify what is already so brilliant in our worlds.
How do we glorify what is already so brilliant in our worlds? I love that line. I'm feeling the enthusiasm and celebratory side of Sagittarius rising that's coming through, and I feel it's supported by Gemini. I'm going to come to our queen of Sagittarius, who is Tina Turner, and she actually has a Gemini moon. And yeah, and she has this way of celebrating life too. And when I think of Gemini, Gemini is the part of Sag. It teaches Sag to share it with other people. And so when I heard you say celebrating other people, maybe by looking at their chart, Gemini is conversational. It wants to create dialogue. It wants to have friendship. It wants to connect with their siblings, their soul siblings, their cosmic cousins. This is the kind of feel of Gemini. And so there's almost this sense when any of us are with Geminis, or people who are embodying Gemini energy, they have the ability to translate information to us so that we feel seen. I think of the Lovers card, and the tarot is associated with Gemini. It's Gemini's soul growth card. And so even though we talk about Gemini often in the astrology community as being very intellectual and communicative and connected to writing, I also think it's always important to come back to the Lovers and remember that Gemini is actually learning to drop out of their head and into their heart to connect with people. And I find that people with Gemini energy, and I think of you as a Gemini moon, the times where I think of when we've interacted, it's felt very like sibling-like. There's almost like a familiarity that you bring, even though we've only met a few times. And actually every time that we've met, it's been in a different city. So there's that kind of travel side too. And I'm also thinking about, you just took a road trip with your actual lover from the West Coast back to Colorado, where you live. And there's something so Gemini about that. So what is your relationship to this energy of the Lovers and having interpersonal relationships and dynamics with people? Have you connected that to your Gemini moon?
Well, it's interesting. My Gemini moon's, because it's opposite, my Sagittarius rising is in my 7th house. And I'm just starting to connect that in this kind of new relationship that I'm in. And I'm connected. The twins come to mind because we had this funny experience on our trip where we were at the hot springs, and we walk into this hot springs, and the woman working there goes, "Oh, are you guys brothers?" And I got so annoyed. I was like, what is this microaggression? I'm like, who goes to the hot springs with their brother? Like the nude hot springs with their brother. I got totally like triggered by it. But I've never dated someone who's the same height as me. And there is some energy between us where there is, there's some kind of twin quality. And I laugh about it now because, of course, I've got my moon in Gemini in the 7th house. So it makes sense that I have kind of this like twin. There's some twinniness in my lover and in my partner. Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of starting to explore that. And I've always dated people who are very, different and haven't had the same that twin vibe. So I'm getting used to it. It's kind of interesting. I've always had the twin inside of me. I've had the twin who wants to like stay home and do nothing, and the twin that wants to be out and do everything. And it's interesting to have that reflected in a partner instead of in aspects of myself.
Yeah. You also had 2 cats at one point too, which I remember thinking about your Gemini moon with that as well.
I know, I couldn't just get 1 cat. I had to get 2 cats, which was overwhelming.
Gemini is, right, it's traditionally ruled by Mercury, and Mercury rules over small animals and children. So there's also this resonance for Gemini with working with any of these themes. And I was even thinking today, as I was preparing to gather with you, I've been kind of bopping all around today. I've been feeling very Sagittarius, and just when I prepare to have a conversation, I start to take on some of the energy of what we're going to talk about. So I've also had a very Gemini day. And I was thinking when we first started the call, my dog Biji was kind of like all over the place. And he's normally not like that. And that's because I've been all over the place today, so I haven't been able to fully tend to him. So I do think of like the mischievousness of having like 2 cats or having like a small dog or like children around can sometimes be Gemini energy too, like misplacing items or forgetting something. But also there's the magic and the flow and the synchronicity of that of, oh my gosh, I just saw the repeating number 2. Like there's all this kind of flow that can also happen with Gemini. So there can be this ethereal, magical quality that Gemini might bring to us, almost like little fairies, like dropping
100.
little clues for us.
I totally feel that little fairy energy. There's like a spirit guide that I work with that's very fairy-like. And when I was thinking about this conversation, I also had a very Gemini day of like doing this and then doing this thing and then doing that thing and then like lots of little vignettes of life in different ways. And I actually get really excited because I do have that Gemini moon. I get really excited when I only have to do one thing for a certain amount of time and it's kind of like forced upon me. Or I like go somewhere and I'm like, oh great, someone else will make me focus on one thing for an entire day. That will be an amazing experience.
Sure, your Scorpio sun appreciates that.
Yeah, my Scorpio sun loves it. I always feel like my Sagittarius and my Gemini are like trying to pull me in 1,000 different directions, and my Scorpio is like, can we just hang at home and do nothing?
Yeah.
Can we just like stay home and have sex and like not try to go out in the world and do everything? But
yeah,
that Gemini moon keeps me. It's a good balance because that Gemini moon keeps me away from being stuck at home all the time or totally isolating. So it's saved me many a time.
Yeah. So we're gathering for the Gemini full moon. I thought we'd look at the Gemini full moon chart in a moment. But before we do that, maybe I'll just connect us to some of Gemini's body parts, because that's something that we do here on Cosmic Cousins is we always take a moment to just bring it back into the body. And as I name Gemini's body parts, I would then love to weave it into a conversation around your many different modalities and how those modalities might relate to these body parts, and maybe even things that we could do during this Gemini full moon to connect us to Gemini. So Gemini is connected to the arms and the hands. It's also connected to the lungs. And then anything that comes in pairs, we can also connect to Gemini. So like the eyes or the ears. Some would even go as far to say the feet, although in my own practice, I connect Pisces, the fish, to the feet. But the arms, the hands, the lungs, the eyes, and the ears, Gemini. So I'm looking at the list of different offerings you have, and one of them is Kundalini Yoga. Could you tell us a little bit about Kundalini Yoga and also how we might connect to these body parts, Gemini, through this Kundalini practice? Is there anything we could be working with on this full moon?
Well, immediately what comes to mind is mudras, and using the hands in different mudras and different positions to work with this moon. There's a mudra where you take the thumb and the index finger of the right hand, and then you squeeze the sides of the pinky. So kind of on each side of the nail, and you kind of squeeze that first segment of the pinky using the thumb and the index finger on the right hand. So you squeeze that left pinky. And this is actually really good for focusing the mind for communication. So, Gemini ruling over communication, storytelling, talking. This is a little, if you have an interview or you have some conversation that needs focus, you can kind of do this little mudra with your hands to focus the mind, because the pinky is connected to that energy of Mercury.
I love that. Also, thinking about Mercury and its connection to like small animals and children, it makes sense that Mercury would also be connected to the smallest little digit there. And yeah, I do connect mudras to Gemini. I think they're really good for Gemini energy. I think of even just placing the hands together in a prayer position. It's like bringing the two sides of the self. We say the yin side and the yang side together. That could be another, just like a very simple one. But I like this pinching of the pinky finger. And when I'm doing it, it's a little tender. Does that mean anything if the digits are tender? Like, I'm like,
well, you did say you spent a lot, you were busy, you've been having a Gemini day and thinking a lot and doing a lot of work. So maybe you need a little relaxation or a little getting out of the mind. And
I think so.
Maybe.
And breathwork is another one of your offerings. And how interesting. Gemini is connected to the lungs. And I do know a lot of Gemini practitioners who have learned breath work is really helpful. And just as an air element, I think Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius really benefit from breath work. Honestly, I've done yoga, I've done mantra work, I've done mudras. The breath work for me is what really changed my life and changed my experience of myself, and just brought a whole nother sense of calm into the world. What's interesting too is my lungs collapsed when I was 16. So my lungs, just to highlight the lungs even more in my life, one collapsed when I was 16 and the next one collapsed when I was 17. But breath work is so vital for me dropping out of my head and calming my mind so that I can actually feel my emotions. Because I think one of the struggles as a Gemini moon is intellectualizing all of my feelings and not just allowing them to be feelings, but having them become stories or trying to figure out my emotions. And I find that breath work calms me down so that, I'm feeling grief, and then I can just feel grief in the body. Or, I'm feeling anger, and I can just feel and express the anger rather than trying to sort it out or figure it out or understand it on an intellectual mind level. Also, part of Gemini's work is to learn how to drop out of the head and into the body, into the heart. So that could be another great tool for us here on this full moon. And when we say breath work, is this like the traditional like breath work? The one, I don't know if it's traditional, but it's like you kind of inhale twice and then exhale, or are we talking like pranayama?
Well, it's so funny. Everyone thinks of holotropic breathing as like breath work. And I'm actually doing a workshop this weekend. And I always have to say it's like simple, calming breath work, not like, and holotropic eventually can be that, but it can be a very intense experience for people. Breath work can be so many different things. There's so many different ways that we can work with the breath. Changing the channels. Are you breathing through the mouth or are you breathing through the nose? Segmenting the breath. Are you breathing in one segment or are you segmenting the breath into 8 different breaths as you inhale? There's a very potent kind of massaging of the brain that happens because you are pressurizing and depressurizing the sinuses that creates this sense of calm when you segment the breath. There's whistling with the breath, right? Really helps us to get into the vagus nerve so that we can feel relaxed and calm when we whistle. Because you don't whistle when you're in a bad mood. You usually only whistle when you're in a good mood. So you can kind of use that with breath work to change your experience of life. So there's many different ways that we can work with the breath. One of the ways that I really like to work with it is just holding the breath in, inhaling for a certain amount of time, holding the breath in, and then exhaling for that same amount of time. That's really like a core practice for me, is just counting, inhaling for 6 or 8 seconds, holding the breath in for 6 or 8 seconds, and then exhaling for 6 or 8 seconds, and then going right back into the inhale. Is really simple and is so effective at slowing you down, getting you in connection with your breath and connection with the body. And what it really develops is a sense of presence, where you can really identify yourself and what you want and who you are, as opposed to the environment and the influences around you.
Cool. I wasn't sure. Yeah, I think when I see breath work, I often go to, what did you call it? Holotropic?
Yeah. And I do that too sometimes with people as well. But I do it more specifically. I think with breath work, I find I like to start, when I work with someone, I like to start them with a really regulating, self-regulating kind of breath work, like the one I just gave an example of. Inhaling for a certain amount of time, holding it, and then exhaling it for the amount of time, so that they have kind of control over the way that they're feeling. They realize they have control over the way that they're feeling. And then once we kind of have that baseline established, then we can go in with holotropic breathing that brings in a lot of energy and a lot of kind of intense sensations into the body. But they already have a baseline foundation of like, oh, okay, I know how to kind of take care of myself, and I know how to kind of change the way that I feel or calm myself back down. And then when you bring in a lot of energy with holotropic breathing, they can actually go further with it because they have a foundation of breath work to work from.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think that when I have participated in holotropic breath work, it sometimes felt aggravating to me, like too intense. And so it's cool to know that you offer other forms of breath work as well. I'm seeing you say Kundalini yoga, meditation, breath work, and gong healing based on the stars. How do the stars weave into all of this? Do you look at someone's birth chart and say, oh, this breath work might work really well with you because you've got a Virgo moon, or, whatever it is? Yeah.
Yeah. I usually look, I look at the whole chart, but I think similar to you, I really put an emphasis on the nodal axis, the north node and the south node. And so, yeah, what I'll do with someone is with private clients, I meet with them, and I'm actually doing a series on this now. Is I'll meet with someone, I'll look at their chart, and I'll talk to them about it. I'll say, it seems like this is the tendencies that you have this lifetime. This is what you're really good at. These are your gifts. And this is kind of the edge point for you. This is the place of growth for you. These are the kind of qualities that your soul wants to develop in this lifetime. And how do we develop that? So there's so many different forms of breath work that we can work with, different kinds of meditations. It really depends on the person. Sometimes breath work works. It makes sense for the person. Sometimes it's more about journaling, or it's more like doing a listening meditation where their skill for them this lifetime is really just to listen and to build the witness and the observer. So it just kind of depends on the person and their chart, and I can kind of synthesize all that information and figure out a way to support them with a practice. And then I kind of help them establish themselves in the practice, because that can be difficult if you don't have a regular meditation practice. So we meet and kind of go over the challenges and the places where maybe there's been some bumps in the road, so that they can find consistency with that and help to develop the gifts that their soul is really looking for this lifetime.
So I'm hearing the north node and the south node being a major point for you for reflection, and the south node being the tendencies that we might fall into or the gifts that we might have. And then the North Node is a point for evolution. That's how I'm hearing you talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's definitely something I look at in each chart. I mean, obviously there's so many other aspects playing into it, but yeah, that's the main through line I see for the soul as to where it's going.
Cool. Could we talk about your nodal axis? Do you feel open to sharing? Or maybe we could talk about, do you work with the current transits nodal axis too? Because we have this Taurus Scorpio axis awake and alive right now.
Well, I do. The course that I just started, we actually started on the new moon solar eclipse. So I kind of sometimes I'll time my courses or my workshops in alignment with the current axis. And then I can teach about the course that I'm doing now. I'm teaching about the nodal axis and also giving everyone a practice in relationship to their nodal axis. So we can kind of explore the astrology and understand the astrology of it. And we can also understand how it applies to us and what practices will support us in developing that North Node. So yeah, I work with it, the current as well. And I just find, doing sound journeys, doing breath work, doing workshops in alignment with the full moon, the new moon, the eclipses, the equinoxes. There's just such a potency to that. I think there's an innate understanding in our bodies from previous lifetimes, from archetypes in our society, in our culture, that we innately recognize these shifts and these moments, maybe on an unconscious level if we don't understand it on a conscious level. And when you can apply a practice of meditation, of listening to the gong at that time, people have a profound experience.
Mm-hmm. I was noticing that you had a full moon lunar eclipse meditation live stream. Is that something that you do regularly if anyone listening would like some support and connection to community?
I do. Every full moon, I do a donation-based meditation online. We do a live stream, and then the recording is always available. And I do that for each full moon. So I'll do one for this one.
This Gemini full moon. Well, why don't we look at the chart and see what we might notice about this particular full moon? I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so that you can see it. I'll just point out a few things that I'm noticing, and then maybe you will too. We have the sun and Mars, or the moon and Mars and Gemini at the same degree, 16 degrees of Gemini. And it's Mars and Gemini retrograde. So that's the first thing that we're noting. Traditionally, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and on this Gemini full moon, Mercury will have just entered Capricorn at the first degree of Capricorn. That's interesting to note. I'm also noting that Venus is at the final few degrees of Sagittarius, conjunct the galactic center, which can be found around 27 degrees of Sag in our chart. And Jupiter is in Pisces, the ruler of Sagittarius, at the final degree of Pisces. So these are just some of the notable things that I'm noticing. There's a few others. We could say Saturn in Aquarius is trine this full moon in Gemini too. So do you notice anything in this chart?
I was just noticing this 15-degree Pisces, but I don't know what that symbol is, kind of the asterisk.
Oh, this is Juno.
Okay.
Yeah, Juno.
Juno too much.
Yeah, Juno in Pisces is making a square to this full moon, a T-square with the sun in Sag and the moon in Gemini. And Juno is relationships and partnerships, collaborations, Pisces, spiritual relationships, otherworldly collaborations, collaboration with a higher power, collaboration through song, dance, mystery. These are some of Juno and Pisces things. Yeah. What do you note about this chart? And when you look at a full moon chart, is this part of your practice, or what would you look for in a full moon chart?
Well, exactly I definitely look at the chart before I do the meditations in preparation for them, and guidance for what practices I think would be most supportive for that full moon. And yeah, I would kind of notice and note all of the aspects. They can't see my face, but I haven't looked at this yet. And when I saw that the moon is like so exactly conjunct this Mars retrograde, I was shock and awe is what I would probably describe on my face. That's especially with the full moon, that just feels particularly intense and potent and powerful. I think whenever we have kind of these more intense aspects in the sky, there's also a lot of potency there. I just immediately start to think about intensity and anger and frustration and agitation, which I feel like already naturally come up on a full moon. But then having Mars involved, but Mars being retrograde, so it's like it can't maybe be expressed, but now the moon's there and it's like it has to be expressed to a certain degree. The full moon's there and it's like it has to be expressed, or it wants to be expressed. And I really think too, especially with that retrograde of I don't know, just like old stories. What's the old stories that we have? And maybe this full moon can really help us to kind of let go of the old stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Yeah, I think that Mars and Gemini, it could manifest in our relationships. Gemini as a relational energy. So just being mindful of that. I think Mars and Gemini is also very creative. Putting your words out there or creating something that is sharing a message, but it's Mars retrograde, so we might be a bit more internal with it. And I'm just thinking in my own life, I've been working on an astro oracle deck while Mars has been retrograde in Gemini, and it won't be released in the world until after Mars is stationed direct. So this is also a time of me kind of going within to direct my ambition and my focus, Mars, towards creating something. It's not necessarily with my hands because it's on my computer, although I am using my hands. Like it still feels very like mercurial and Gemini-like. And it's me sharing all of my ideas, putting it down on paper. So it could be like aggressively writing, working on some sort of project that will then be released later into next year when Mars goes direct in Gemini. And I do think that this full moon being at the same degree as Mars, it's almost like this full moon offers us a spotlight to reflect on the entirety of this 7-month Mars and Gemini transit. And so we may receive some sort of new insights of to what this transit means for us and how we are navigating it. And so I'm opening myself up to receiving any sort of insights or cosmic cookie crumbs in a very Gemini ways, like following like the synchronicities of ways to better make use of this so that I can be of service to myself and to other people with this Mars and Gemini transit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's going to be a lot of insight into this full Mars retrograde because we've been in it for a while now, and I still don't feel like I have the full grasp on what it's illuminating for me. And so I'm really interested to reflect, take some time on that full moon and reflect as to what has been the impact and what's shifting and changing and how am I changing what I put my energy into and what excites me and what motivates me. This Mars retrograde.
Well, I think, anyone that has Gemini energies like strong in their chart, and for you as someone with moon in Gemini, this whole time period is activated for you. And from my own perspective of just knowing you and being your friend, when Mars first entered Gemini, that's when you came to Portland to pick up your partner to bring them to Colorado. And then Mars was retrograde, and then you both drove back in a van to pick up the remainder of their belongings. to then return back. So it's almost like Mars transiting through your 7th house has been putting more focus and drive and ambition towards relationships in your life, and particularly one that's like really close, moon, and emotional. And this is the first full moon for you where maybe you're like, oh, wow, this is actually happening and unfolding. You've gotten the remainder of your things. And so it doesn't always have to be like, I think there's this like fear sometimes in astrology, like, oh, moon, Mars, like this is going to be like a huge blow up. No, it could also just be illuminating the passion and the direction and the ambition that you're taking in your own life into your Gemini hands. And then as Mars stations direct, which will be, I think it's early January, Mars stations direct, and then it'll eventually move on by March into Cancer, and we'll start on new themes. But you have had a big focus of energy in relationship at this time. So I'm using you as an example here. I hope that's okay. I know your Scorpio sometimes likes to keep things secret. But Gemini's just saying, no, just tell the guys.
My Scorpio is a little secretive, but I'm that Gemini moon really, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm too secretive. We can talk, we can discuss it all. Let's put it all out there.
We did do something magical when you were here. We went and got food, and then we drew a tarot card from the Be With Your Body tarot, and you kept that card. It was the 10 of hips. And just those experiences, I feel like Geminis are more open to them, to receiving, just like little messages here and there. So yeah, that's how I sense that Mars and Gemini transit for you. And so all of us are probably, finding an extended period of time where we're directing ambition towards the Gemini part of our chart. And if you don't have a lot of Gemini placements, then maybe it's speaking to my Aquarius as an example, which is me then like making an oracle deck, because it's connecting us to the cosmos. Yeah. So it's also balancing us to Sagittarius season. And before we started the call, you also said, "Ooh, I'm thinking about 2023 and all the teachings and the workshops and the travel that I'm going to do." So we also are here in this very expansive time of year. And of course, Sagittarius season, we're always looking towards what's next, what's the new vision. So what are you feeling into for 2023? Are there any like collective theme shifts that you're sensing into? What does this Sagittarius time of year mean for you? And how do you navigate this time of year, especially like the holidays, as a queer person? I just threw a bunch of questions at you, but popping into my mind.
First, I'll say what Sagittarius season means for me. One is it's always exciting. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm in my sun period. So it's always a exciting time of year for me, just because I think there's something about, the time right before Sagittarius season, Scorpio season, where the sun starts to fade in the northern hemisphere and it gets darker and darker. And I go, oh my God, can I do this? Like, can I deal with this much darkness? And then by the end of Scorpio season, I'm like, I got this. I like this. Like, I love this. It's actually funny because I found this retreat where they just like put you in a cave for like several days and you're just in like complete darkness for however long you want to do this kind of meditation practice. And I got so excited about it. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to do this. Yeah, it's like kind of coming into the darkness. And then by the time we get to Sagittarius season, like for me, at least, it's like, okay, I can do this. I've got this. And I've started to connect with my own energy. I know because it's just been my birthday. I'm in my sun period, but also because I think when it's darker, you go a little more in, you connect a little bit more with yourself, and you get to kind of feel your own energy and know your own energy. And so there's the optimism of that, of like, oh, what do I want to do? What do I want to create in the world? What wants to be manifest through me? And I find the holidays are put in a very inconvenient time with that. I almost feel like the holidays are like the consumeristic, capitalistic way of like dealing with Sagittarius and like Capricorn energy, because I just don't see, they don't feel like shoppers to me. Do you know what I mean? It feels like a time to like envision and like I don't know, get things done, but it's not necessarily the time to like be perusing a mall, but we're kind of like guilted into doing it because it should, it shows people around us that we love them. But yeah, so the holidays are as a queer person are to answer that question are interesting. I got to do Thanksgiving in a very Sagittarius way, and I was at a nude hot springs in California with my partner and like a bunch of other like hippies that had kind of opted out of hanging out with their families, and it was really nice. It was really nice. I gotta say, it was a different experience than getting on a plane and going to Texas, which is normally what I do. I'm excited for this holiday season because I'm staying here in Boulder with my partner, and I'm not much of a Christmas fanatic, but they love Christmas, and we're having a very Christmas weekend of getting a Christmas tree and making gingerbread houses and all of those things. So I'm kind of excited at this new queer relationship way of relating to the holidays. So it'll be exciting to kind of create our own rituals, because we're actually, I teach a lot at this space called the Star House. That's this very sacred temple just outside of Boulder, and we're getting the tree from there. And it feels like we're helping to kind of tend to the forest because we have so many wildfires here, and they to care for the land, we have to clear certain trees. So kind of always thought of like, taking a tree from the land as like stealing, or I don't know, robbing, or had some like negative connotation with taking these live trees. And actually now I see it as stewardship. So I'm excited to do that.
Yeah, there is something about Sagittarius season where I've been making Yuletide wands. I've been taking cedar clippings from my yard and wrapping them with cinnamon and dried orange, and they act as ornaments, but also a way to channel my energy for blessings in the new year. And I give them to friends and loved ones, and it's a tradition that I like to do. And I do think of Sagittarius as having some sort of ritual. And also, I always find this particularly interesting, but Sagittarius is a sign that's connected to the great outdoors. We don't talk about Sagittarius in this way a lot because it's a fire sign, but it is very connected to the earth. I mean, if you think about world travel, where you're going and seeing all of these epic places, think of the Grand Canyon as a Sagittarian experience. I think of, I don't know, maybe going to the Great Wall of China as a Sagittarian experience. It's these things that maybe we only do once in a lifetime that are these epic spiritual voyages that are often in some way honoring the cycle of the year. Sagittarius is connected to the wheel of the year. It has that expansive outlook, is often connected to these places in nature that just have epic scenes. And I think of, people with Sagittarian energy, I think of like extreme sports are often somehow connected to like the magnitude of this human experience of like climbing a mountain or going surfing. It's like this all feels Sagittarian to me. And I'm feeling into some of that and what you're saying of just, even connecting to nature in a way of bringing a tree into your home. There's something Sagittarian about it that also then takes us to Capricorn, which is also an earth sign that I feel into this time of year. So as we come to the close of our combo, I'm wanting like an image to come through from your life. So I'm going to share your personal myth, is what I call it. And maybe a memory will come to mind where you could connect us to an epic Sagittarian moment that you've had in your life, while also a Gemini moon experience in there. So the personal myth for you, the sun is the character. So the Scorpio sun, you are the intense Scorpion. We could say the transformative Scorpion. Gemini moon in your neighbor's backyard. Gemini moon connecting us to the local immediate surroundings. Sagittarius rising, expanding the horizons of our mind and our world. Sagittarius rising. So that's your little personal myth. Be curious if that brings up a memory.
Well, immediately when I think about, when you say bring up a Sagittarius memory, I'm like, oh, well, all my world travel or like something along that. But then we ground it with this like Gemini in your neighbor's backyard kind of thing. It just kind of reminds me of my life, which is that, I feel like I go on these both inner and outer Sagittarius excursions to understanding myself or understanding the nature of reality through meditation or through, traveling the world or just seeking, right? This kind of like Sagittarius seeker. And I've been really grounded here in Boulder for the last 9 years, which is surprising to me. I never thought I would be somewhere for so long. And I literally get invited to do gong baths in like people's backyard.
That sounds nice.
This is a good one for Sagittarius because, we have a mutual friend, Almond Beer. And when Almond Beer first came to visit me, I saw 3 foxes in one day. So I really associate the fox archetype, this like trickster with Sagittarius.
And with almond beer.
And almond beer. And I was doing a full moon gong bath in a neighbor's yard. And in the middle of the practice, while I'm playing the gong, everyone's laying down. It was a picture. Everyone's laying down in a circle around me. I'm playing the gong, and a fox comes into the yard and starts stealing people's shoes as I'm playing the gong. And I'm having to like bat away this fox and be like, get out of here, while I'm like also trying to like play the gong gently and like lovingly for everyone. So
goodness,
I feel like that is a fun little trickster, a little bit of Gemini energy, a little bit of Sagittarius energy, spiritual seeking. I don't know. I think it's got kind of all those energies wrapped up in it.
I think so. I mean, we were talking about Gemini and its connection to maybe smaller animals. Yeah. And then Sagittarius as connection to the great outdoors. So it's not like a domesticated small animal. It's a wild small animal. And it's also making me think I have a fox printed on my wall. It's on my gallery wall that I just created. And I got it because my grandmother's maiden name is Fox. And my dog Biji, I think, has like a fox-like quality. And that's something that has also connected us recently, is that when I picked up Biji in Colorado almost 2 years ago now, I met up with you in Boulder right before going to pick him up. And we have that like special moment too. And then you've met him, you went on a hike with him in Portland. That's interesting for me to think about foxes with Sagittarius now. And I'm even picturing like the archer kind of like running through the woods with a bow and arrow and having a fox by their side. So I'm going to be feeling into this fox energy on this Gemini full moon. It feels like the Gemini Sag polarity to me in many ways. So I like that this image came through for us with a fox here. And I can't believe a fox was actually like stealing people's shoes.
It was one of the most wild experiences I've had while playing the gong. It was hilarious because it wanted the leather sandals and stuff from people. So it would carry, like some people lost their shoes in this gong.
Oh God. That's hilarious. It's been the gong playing feels like the Scorpio to me. I actually know another Scorpio who's a gong player, and it's so intense. So that's like the intense Scorpion part in your neighbor's backyard, expanding the horizons of our mind and world. Do you have any recordings of you playing the gong that we could maybe listen to close our time out?
I totally do. Yeah, I have a few. Yeah.
Would you feel open for us to drop one in that you think might be appropriate for this particular lunation?
Of course. Yeah.
And what would you recommend for us to do as we listen to it? Is it something we should lay down and receive, or is it okay to be driving a car while listening to it?
Driving a car, you can decide whether it's spacing you out too much or not. Kind of depends on the person and and where they're at, and the speakers, like first I would say it's always great with the gong. If you can listen to headphones, you're going to have a much deeper experience of it if you can put some headphones on. But either laying down or just sitting still with your eyes closed and just taking the time to listen to the vibrations will put you in an open, expansive, and creative state. It'll help to bring you into your kind of slow down your brain waves, and there's a lot of potential in that slowness.
And that sounds just what we need here this time of year. And is there a particular gong track is coming to mind right now for us?
I was going to do the 50-inch gong that I have, but I have one that is this 36-inch, really beautiful, shining, brilliant gong that's a little more clearing. The way that I play it is a little more clearing and clarifying, and I think that one could be nice. Good for the full moon.
Well, let's listen to that now. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Pavanjeet, and for being here with us for this Gemini full moon on Cosmic Cousins. If people were interested in working with you, going to your sound baths or breath work or working with you in any way, how might they find you?
They can find me at my website, pavanjeet.com, pavanjeet.com.
What does Pavanjeet mean?
It means breath of victory. So Pavan is the possessor of breath, or like wind. So again, connecting with that air element and the lungs. Jeet means victory.
There it is. And your Instagram handle is pavanjeet.jpg.
That's true.
I love that. When did you switch it to that? I was like looking at that. I was like, it didn't used to always be that, did it?
I switched it like maybe a year or so ago. I don't remember what it was before, but I just thought that was fun.
It's very Gemini wackiness.
Yeah, gotta bring that in there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for carving out the space in your life. It was so fun hanging with you for this past hour. Happy Gemini full moon to you.
Thank you. This was lovely. It was great to get to chat with you in this way.
Okay, Cosmic Cousins, thank you for being here. Happy Gemini full moon to you. If you'd like to leave some reviews and love, you can do that. That would be awesome. And happy final full moon of 2022. I'm looking forward to connecting with you in the new year. Again, I have astrology and tarot readings available, and also some mentorship spots. I have 2 mentorship spots open for 2023. I'd love to connect with you in that way. And take sweet care, and remember, deep breaths.